Hello, I'm Fons Trompenaars. I was very excited by this work on cross-cultural and intercultural management because born out of a French mother and a Dutch father, you get it soon. Did my PhD in the area in the early 80s and worked 9 years with Shell and more trying to practice what we preach. It was an environment where we said, but knowing cultural differences is not good enough. We need to do something with those differences. That's why I went to Riana and said, Riana, let's write a book because she's teaching that subject. I'm doing this only in a part-time manner at the Free University of Amsterdam. And what we are trying to do is to follow a method that goes beyond showing cultural differences, but really trying to reconcile those differences and create a reality that is richer than only knowing about cultural differences.
I'm Riana Schreuders. I'm a lecturer at the Hogeschool van Amsterdam, or the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, where I'm also assistant professor, and I teach the wonderful subject of cross-cultural management for our first and second year students. I'm also a guest lecturer at Nairo, the Business University, for cross-cultural management in year 2. And after many years of working in the intercultural consulting business with Fons Trompenaars and now being in the teaching business, I've noticed that there's really been a discrepancy between what we're doing in the academic world and where the business world is going. A lot of the theories and models that we use in the classroom and the methods we use in the classroom are outdated. And if you're watching this video, you're probably in the same boat as I am, that overnight we all had to switch to a fully digital teaching method for which we're not trained necessarily. And suddenly we're at a loss of what do we do? How do we move forward?
What we have done in the Edubook is having a book that is loaded with casework, that is loaded with exercises, but it's trying to practice a fairly solid theory, namely the 7 dimensions of culture and ways to reconcile those differences, which we call dilemma reconciliation. And it's wonderful to work with Riana because she has the practical experience that we would like to submit to you in the book. What distinguishes our work, I think, from many others is that we also developed a way to deal with cultural differences in a quite creative way. Creativity is about connecting different values that normally are not easily joined, therefore scarce, therefore profitable. In other words, innovation is the end result of this process of reconciliation. And we have a couple of steps to follow. And these are 6 steps. First of all, what is the dilemma? And very often people think in problems, but very often problems that you cannot solve are dilemmas. On the one hand, on the other hand. Then we try to chart the dilemma by cracking the line in a dual axis as an invitation to ask, what can I do with X that gives me more of Y, with an intermediate step of stretching. And that means what are the positives and the negatives of both sides. And the process of reconciliation is really about how can one value help its opposite. And we have a variety of ways of doing that, which we are discussing in the book. And then finally, what do we do to realize and root this? Those are the 6 steps of dilemma reconciliation, loaded with exercises. I would like to introduce Riana for introducing the book in more detail.
So the first modules start with recognizing, in the first place, what is my culture? What is culture in the first place? And what does it look like? So we give some of the basic theories that will probably not be new for you, the onion model of culture, going all the way to your values and your basic assumptions. And moving from recognition to respect, recognizing that respect is not just knowing when to bow and when to shake hands. Do I kiss, which we can't do anyway right now anymore, or do I give a fist bump or a foot bump? What is appropriate? It's not about the outward expressions of culture, but the realizing that I have 2 sides within myself, that our culture has highlighted one element and that there's another side what is my dominant writing hand is what my culture highlights, but that I also have a left hand, and when we're doing business, we're trying to clap and make noise and not only move and poke each other in this increasingly polarized society, but moving towards each other and integrating our value. And then the third part is reconciliation, and reconciliation is really about connecting opposing viewpoints to create value and to create more sufficient, more effective solutions for the problems that we're faced with in our day-to-day interactions. At a personal level, in terms of one-on-one interactions, at a team level, in terms of how do I deal with my team, or as a teacher, my multicultural classroom. And then at a corporate level, in terms of business dilemmas, how do I reconcile my short-term need for cash flow and my long-term strategy to create wealth and to make sure that I have a sustainable business in the future. So we try to take students through a step-by-step approach in terms of reconciliation, how to identify a dilemma, how to work with the two opposing viewpoints, to stretch it, to see what happens when we polarize, what happens if we only go for the right hand or the left hand in my previous analogy, and how do we bring these two together to integrate them in a way that is much more than the sum of the parts. And then we end up with a final module that's really about applying the theory that the students are learning in the previous modules through an individual assignment that really aims to challenge a student to go and look at their own intercultural competence, becoming aware of their own intercultural orientations, and going out into the real world and doing something that's going to stretch their learning, reflecting on that and writing a report about it. And then secondly, identifying as a group of students in a multicultural setting a real world business dilemma and analyzing a real company as if they were consultants and coming up with a reconciled solution. So realizing and rooting in the sense of how do I apply the theory and how do I make sense of it in the real business context.
At the very end, we will give a lot of tools. An assessment of your intercultural competence, namely the competence to deal with the 4 R's that Riana has explained before. We will have an IAP, the Intercultural Awareness Profiler, that gives you your value profile. That value profile is also part of a tool that we call the Culture for Business School, a tool which is a tool that helps you to give insights in 140 cultures, and students can use it by getting better insight in the cases that they get, but also in writing their thesis or what have you. And that is something we would like to offer. On top of that, and it's the final point I would like to make, is we would love to train you in how to use the book effectively. In other words, an e-learning on the dimensions, an e-learning on dilemma reconciliation, but also some practice with Riana and myself in how to use the cases dealt with in the Edubook.